Welcome, everybody. We'll get started here in just a minute. All right, so tonight we're going to go over what is NCEES and why do they determine testing. So welcome to the monthly webinar, and tonight we're going to talk about, again, like I just said, what is NCEES and why do they determine testing. But before we get into that, I wanted to give you guys a quick update on the Texas RPLS exam that I told you I attended the webinar here just recently. Okay, so to those who attended the webinar with TSPS, Texas Society of Professional Surveyors, you already know the answer to this, but for the rest of us, so the question was answered, or not answered basically, but from the information that they provided, they only have the fundamentals of surveying and the principles and practices. Oh, sorry, the fundamentals of surveying and the state-specific exam that are required. Give me 1 second. Let me turn down this headset. There we go. So they currently are not requiring still the principles and practices exam, just the fundamentals of surveying and the state specific. Okay. All right. So again, tonight we're going to cover NCEES and why they determine testing. So again, I'll be your host tonight. My name is Chris with NLC Test Prep. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. Come out for any of the new videos coming out and be alerted. Okay, so now that we've got the update on the Texas RPLS and what exams they're requiring, let's jump right into NCEES. So NCEES stands for the National Council of Engineers, or sorry, National Council of Examiners for Engineers and Surveyors. There we go. It's a mouthful. So we're going to go over the purpose of the council, how it all began, NCEES and how it was formed, the uniform exam established, and then the relationship between surveyors and engineers. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in here. Be glad to answer them for you or get back to you in a comment. All right, so let's go ahead and go. So NCEES, like I said, it's the National Council of Examiners for Engineers and Surveyors. So NCEES is a nonprofit organization dedicated to advancing professional licensure for engineers and surveyors. It develops, administers, and scores the examinations used for engineers and land surveyors in the United States. All right, so the primary function of NCEES is to prepare standardized confidential examinations that are used by the state and territorial boards to help determine the competency of individuals seeking to become licensed to practice as professional engineers or land surveyors. So that's their only goal, that's their only task. So the purpose of the council is also to promote uniformity of practicing of the administration of state regulation laws for professional engineers and land surveyors, to establish and maintain a system of national qualification for registration, to provide for reciprocal relations between state boards. So basically, any of them that where you can transfer your exam or licensure, that's what they do, is they'll talk between states as well. And to foster any movements having for their aim for promotion of the public welfare through engineering registration and through the improvement of professional standards. Whew, it's a mouthful. But yeah, so they do quite a bit. All right, so how it all began. So in the United States, engineers and surveyors are licensed in the state and territory level. U.S. licensure began in 1891 when California passed legislation, excuse me, uh, to regulate surveying. Engineer followed in 1907 when Wyoming began requiring licensure for both engineers and surveyors. As more states enacted similar legislation over the next decade, U.S. licensing boards began to see the need for a national council to help improve uniformity of laws and to promote mobility of licensure throughout the country. All right, so NCEES was created in 1920 for those reasons. Since its founding, NCEES has focused on providing services to advance licensure and facilitate mobility among the licensing jurisdictions. And so they basically serve several services. So engineering exams, surveying exams, exam prep material, records program, credentials evaluations, and CPC tracking, or continual professional competency. So all your continuing education classes are gone through them. When you go and you complete school, whether it be associates, bachelors, and took, say, civil engineering classes or surveying classes, that's where they do the credential evaluations, keep it all on record. And then, as you can see, when you register for one of the exams through NCEES, you can see basically the reference material and everything on there as well. So the organization, now known as National Council of the Examiners for Engineering and Surveying, was created in 1920. So the members of NCEES are engineering and surveying licensing boards from all 50 states, the District of Columbia, Guam, Northern Islands, Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands. They're all organized by zones. So you've got your central, northeastern, southern, and western. Each zone meets in the spring, as well as the council's annual business meetings in August. All right. So in 1903, this is kind of how it all began. Clarence Johnson accepted the position as the state engineer in Wyoming. He found the office in poor condition. The main problem began that untrained individuals were working as engineers and surveyors. A law mandated that everyone who wished to use state water to irrigate land had to file an application for a permit. It also required filing a map that outlined streams, canals, reservoirs, and lands to be irrigated. So Johnson wrote that he discovered that lawyers, notaries, and others were making the maps and signing them as engineers and surveyors. So this led to the confusing, inaccurate records. To remedy this, he prepared a bill that the legislation passed in 1907. After it took effect, Johnson committed the most astonishing change took place within a few months in the character of maps and plans with the applications for permits. Other states soon passed similar laws. For surveyors, this was usually done to prevent boundary disputes. For engineers, the licensure tended to focus on the safety of building on the built environment. As each state developed its own licensure law, members of the licensing board began to recognize the need for the central body to coordinate their efforts. As a matter stood before 1920, engineers had to go through the licensure and registration process in every state where they wanted to practice because boards did not recognize others' licenses. And that's pretty much how it is still for surveyors. You got to get licensed in every state you want to. Some of them are reciprocal, but a majority you are having to get individually licensed. Standards for licensure also vary greatly from state to state. Like I just talked about, licensing boards felt that the national body was needed to work towards professional standards and reciprocal recognition. Okay, so the organization, so the NCEES was created, like I said, in 1920 for these reasons. The members of the board, we already went over this, basically from all 50 states collaborate and go over everything. So in 1937, they addressed the complicated issues of the relationship between land surveyors and professional engineers. Let's go on to this one. Here we go. So Paul Rice and the New Jersey Society of Professional Engineers and Surveyors addressed the body by arguing that land surveyors could be considered in the same general practice category, as engineers. He suggested that all engineers be required to take at least one course in surveying, and this would help alleviate the problem of untrained engineers practicing surveying. Being a professer of surveying, one of the major interests was to strengthen surveying programs at colleges and universities. So he was kind of doing it for himself, but it was also to better, I guess, in a whole, all the individuals working and anybody who was practicing, so they'd have the knowledge. So other important businesses, like I said, basically the committee established areas that each applicant would have to pass in order to become registered by the various state boards. It would consist of two parts. So kind of like your exams now. So for the fundamentals, principles, and practices, you got the morning, the afternoon session. Well, they had that too, but it was a little longer. So basically, the first lasting 2.5 days, the second half of the third day. So part one, testing of the fundamentals, had 5 individual tests: mathematics, applied science, elements for electrical and machine design, and engineering economics, laws, and practice. So graduates of accredited engineering schools could exempt automatically from the first 2 tests, so mathematics and applied sciences, and were eligible to exempt from all but the last one if they had taken an equivalent examination in school. Part 2 consisted of 5 special areas of engineering, and every applicant had to pass at least one. These were civil engineering, mechanical, industrial, electrical, chemical engineering, and mining, and basically another metallurgical engineering. So another issue that was in 1933 conviction addressed was the illegal use of the determination engineer by unregistered or unqualified persons. So in 1934, largely through the energies of Steinman, the council had approved a rigorous 3-day examination. Whew. So if you guys thought you had it bad now with that 6 or 7 hour exam, imagine a 3-day one. All right, so next we're going to go to a relationship between land surveyors and engineers. So in 1937, delegates addressed the complicated issue of the relationship between land surveyors and professional engineers. So Professor Paul Rice of the New Jersey Society of Professional Engineers and Surveyors addressed the body by arguing that land surveyors should be considered in the same general practice as engineers. Again, same thing, requesting that at least one class be taken. Again, if you guys have any questions about who they are and how they got formed for NCEES, feel free to reach out, leave a comment. Be glad to answer them for you. And just to go over it again real quick for anybody just joining us now, we went over NCEES, what they are, what it stands for. So the National Council of Examiners for Engineers and Surveyors. That's NCEES. So the purpose of the council, how it all began, NCEES, how it was formed, the uniform examination established, and then the relationship between surveyors and engineers. So again, the purpose of the council is to prepare the standardized confidential exams that are used by state and territory boards to help determine the competency of individuals seeking to become licensed to practice professional engineers and land surveyors. And it all began 1891 when California passed legislation to regulate surveying. Engineering followed briefly after at 1907 in Wyoming. So NCEES was created in 1920 for the reasons we talked about previously, focusing on providing advanced licensure and for mobility among licensing jurisdictions. And what they cover NCEES is engineering exams, surveying exams, exam prep material, records programs, credential evaluations, and CPC tracking, or your continuing education. Remember that the engineering surveying boards are from all 50 states, so District of Columbia, Guam, Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands. They've got engineers or land surveyors from every state. Again, all started in 1903 from Clarence Johnston, who was basically a state engineer for Wyoming. With all the individuals that were basically untrained or unlicensed, he worked at making a law and mandating that they meet the requirements. Again, other states soon passed similar laws for surveyors. This was usually done to prevent boundary disputes because, again, it was done by attorneys or notaries, someone who was not qualified to do a proper boundary back then. Standards for licensure also vary greatly from state to state. Licensing boards felt that the national body was needed in order to work towards professional standards and reciprocal recognition. Okay, and then like I said, uniformed exam established. So one of the first exams, you're looking at a 3-day exam. Quite lengthy. So yeah, I wouldn't have made it through that one. I can tell you that. So, but yeah. So originally 2.5 days. The second day was basically half of the third day, and that was the first part covering your math, applied science, elements of electrical and mechanical design, engineering, economics, laws and practices, and then the second part again covering at least one of those areas: civil engineering, mechanical and industrial, electrical, chemical engineering, mining, and metallurgical engineering. Another was issued in 1933. But yes, so it was a long exam back then. So they've cut it down from that 3-day exam to what it is now, which is your either 6 or 7 hour exam for the fundamentals of surveying and the principles and practices. All right. And again, if you guys had any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments now. If we don't see them now, I can always reply back to you later. Let you know in the YouTube video as you're watching it. But feel free to like and subscribe. See the most current and up-to-date content coming out. And again, my name is Chris with NLC Test Prep. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us, 877-758-6262. Or you can shoot us an email at support@nlcprep.com. Be glad to answer anything for you. All right. Well, thanks again, guys, for joining in. And if you have any questions, like I said, feel free to reach out to us. We'd be glad to help you working towards your licensure, becoming a professional land surveyor.